First, let's start with this case. I am an 18-year-old female, and I'm currently facing a difficult situation. Please forgive any grammatical errors or unnecessary details, as English is not my first language. I want to make this as clear as possible. My 22-year-old male cousin wants to move to another city to complete the final years of his college program. He has been struggling with his studies for a while now, failing multiple times, and believes that switching to a new location will help him finally finish his degree. He has already discussed this with his mother, but from what I've heard, she isn't pleased because of the significant cost involved. The move, according to my cousin, will cost around 5 digits in my country's currency. This estimate doesn't even include daily living expenses such as rent, food, and utilities, so the actual cost could be much higher. Our grandmother has now asked me to lend him the money. I recently received back about 90% of a loan I had given to another family member a year ago. This money is meant to secure my own future, as I am about to start college myself in a few months. On the same day I got the money back, my grandmother approached me and asked if I could lend about 80% of it to my cousin for his education. I'm conflicted. On one hand, I understand that my cousin's situation is tough, and I know education is important to him. On the other hand, he has been struggling with this program for a long time. He has repeated at least 1 year due to not meeting the required passing grades. Personally, I don't think this program is the right fit for him, and I worry that even with a change in location, his chances of success are slim. I've tried to discuss this with my family before, suggesting that he might consider switching to a more feasible program, but he's been adamant about finishing this one. He has even said, if I'm not graduating with this program, then I'd rather not graduate at all. If I lend him the money, I risk jeopardizing my own education and future plans. I know it might seem selfish, but this money is crucial for my own stability. At the same time, I don't want to disappoint my family or seem unsupportive. I've spoken to my parents about this, but they haven't given me any clear advice and keep avoiding the topic. Would I be wrong to refuse to lend my cousin the money for his move and education, knowing that it could impact my own future? Let's start judging. No, do not do it. You will never get that money back. Do not jeopardize your own education or life for anyone other than your husband or kids. You don't have either yet. Therefore, your money is only to be spent on yourself. Tell your grandmother you're not able to give your cousin any money, but since she feels so passionately about helping him, you'll gladly drive her to the bank so she can take out a loan herself to help him. Your family are all idiots. Trying to take money from an 18-year-old kid to help someone else? Get the hell out. You're not in the wrong. You're not in the wrong. Do not loan him money. If he is failing now, a new location is not magically going to change anything. Stop taking foolish risks with this money and pay for your own education. It's only a loan if he can realistically pay you back. Doesn't sound like he could. So, your grandmother is asking you to gift your cousin the money. I say gift because you're going to need this money in approximately 2 years for your Anu'n education. How realistical is it that the cousin, his parents, or your grandmother can pay you back? Considering that they are asking an 18-year-old for money, my guess is that no one can scrunch up the cash. So, it's a gift. And imagine what names they will call you when you ask for your money back after your cousin fails school. How selfish, heartless of you to kick them while they're down. You're not being selfish for not helping. Your grandmother asking this of you is selfish. Next up, I've been friends with a woman for over 20 years who lives across the border. Our older kids are the same age, but I also have younger ones now, and I'm married. My husband is a kind and open person who respects my small group of close friends. Over the years, this friend and I have had ups and downs. I've often overlooked certain situations because I know she's dealt with significant past trauma. However, these situations tend to repeat themselves. For instance, once she stopped contacting me because her abusive boyfriend at the time told her she wasn't allowed to see me. When he eventually broke up with her, she has trouble letting go of toxic relationships. She reappeared, and we picked up as though nothing had happened. I dislike drama and tend to let things go easily. Now we're in a similar situation again. She has nowhere to go because her current boyfriend, another unhealthy relationship, doesn't want her staying with him. I feel like I need to open my home to her again to help her out, even though people around me are advising against it. To be honest, I have my reservations too. She has a very disruptive day and night rhythm, and my husband and I both work. The last time she stayed with us, her screaming and fighting on the phone in the middle of the night woke us, and even the kids, up. I struggle with setting boundaries and often prioritize helping others over my own well-being, even when it causes me stress. I've been dealing with migraines and anxiety for over 20 years, and my doctor has advised me to avoid stressful situations. Despite this, I always follow my heart instead of my head, even though past experiences have proven me wrong. I feel torn because I would feel guilty if I didn't help her, but I also know the toll it could take on me and my family. I would appreciate feedback or advice on how to handle this situation. Should I prioritize my own family's well-being and set boundaries? Or should I open my home and help her once again? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Having the ability to help doesn't obligate you to help, particularly if helping comes at the expense of yourself or your family. That she picks the wrong people is not your problem. You would risk her never leaving, particularly if she isn't financially stable. Your medical conditions make it inadvisable to take her in. The advice that people are giving you not to take her in seems unanimous. Taking people in might seem free or cheap, but it isn't. It would have an impact on everyone in your family. You have mentioned that she argues loudly enough on the phone to wake up other people. For me, that would be reason enough to not take her in. You need your sleep. That she has no other help available strongly suggests that she has burned a lot of bridges with other people. You don't owe this friend anything. Everything that you say indicates that she is a bad fit for your household. Consider that it is rare that we change our circumstances unless we are willing to be uncomfortable for a while. The reduction in tension or guilt that you would get by taking her in would come at the cost of being uncomfortable, even resentful, every day as the result of her conduct. Taking her in doesn't give her a clean break. It just brings her problems into your home. You're not in the wrong. You sound like a very kind-hearted friend. I think it's time to tell her that sadly, you can't do it this time and you have to prioritize your health. You may end up with an angry friend. It's hard, but you can't do it to yourself. You're not in the wrong if you don't house this friend, but you're an idiot for prioritizing a toxic friend over your family, particularly the children you're responsible for. You show extreme empathy for your friend, and in doing so, give no consideration to your family and their needs. Your friend needs to struggle on her own and not be bailed out by you constantly. That fact you tolerate and excuse her abuse doesn't mean you have to keep giving in. Eventually, your kids are going to react to you constantly prioritizing this friend. Next up, I started this job a month after one of my coworkers, and over the first 6 months, we became good acquaintances. I thought we were developing a friendship. We'd hang out, have lunch together, walk to our cars, and interact on social media. However, I noticed he only texted me during work hours and never initiated contact outside of work. Eventually, I dialed back my expectations and kept things professional. When I started attending full-time, in-person classes for school, they stopped inviting me to hang out as much. Initially, it hurt, but I realized I was busy and couldn't expect them to always include me. I figured it was just a work friendship and let it go. After that, he rarely reached out. When he got a promotion and moved departments, he became busier, and our interactions dwindled to brief, surface-level exchanges. I understand this is normal, but it's important for context. When I first joined the company, he had a Friday coffee tradition with another coworker. He invited me to join, and the three of us went weekly for months. As our dynamic shifted and we drifted apart, he stopped attending as regularly. One week, he skipped because he was sick, and later because he was too busy. When he couldn't go, we'd pick up coffee for him, and he'd pay us back, which wasn't a big deal. However, after his promotion, he stopped coming altogether. After several weeks of him declining, I stopped asking if he wanted coffee. One week, I didn't check in with him at all, assuming he wasn't interested anymore. Later that day, he texted me upset that I hadn't asked if he wanted coffee. At first, I felt bad, but then I thought about how he had stopped inviting me to things and how distant our dynamic had become. It didn't seem fair for him to feel slighted when he had done the same. If the roles were reversed, I wouldn't expect someone to automatically buy coffee for me. I'd text my order ahead of time, confirm it was okay, and pay up front. But he didn't do any of that. Instead, we'd have to ask, wait for his response, sometimes delayed, buy the coffee, and then wait to be paid back. This last time, he didn't even pay me back. It's not about the money, it's about feeling like a delivery service. I wouldn't mind doing it if it meant connection or conversation, but lately he just says thanks, takes the coffee, and gets back to work. I understand he's busy, but if he's too busy to connect, why expect others to go out of their way for him? It also hurts because I valued this work relationship. As a neurodivergent person, work friendships are one of my main sources of connection during the day. Losing that potential friendship has been disappointing. Maybe I'm overreacting, but it feels like I'm being used. I don't want to cause tension, but I also don't want to keep feeling like a personal delivery service. He can get defensive when confronted, so I'm worried that addressing this will escalate into unnecessary conflict. Would I be wrong to stop going out of my way to get him coffee and prioritize my own boundaries instead? Let's start judging. You're not in the wrong. Personally, I would reply casually that, sorry, didn't think of it since he hasn't come in so long. It's not reasonable of him to expect you to ask every week. If you are willing to bring him coffee as long as he asks ahead of time, tell him to let you know beforehand next week. If not, leave it at, sorry, didn't think of it. You're not in the wrong. You're not being dramatic. And it's completely reasonable to feel frustrated in this situation. You've been putting in effort to maintain the relationship, but it seems like your coworker has become more distant and is taking advantage of your kindness without reciprocating. It's unfair for him to expect you to continue the coffee tradition when he's no longer engaging or showing interest in maintaining the connection. If he's too busy to connect, he shouldn't expect you to go out of your way for him, especially when it feels one-sided. It sounds like you've done your part, and now you're just trying to establish a more balanced, respectful dynamic. It's also important to set boundaries so you don't feel used or like a delivery service. It's not unreasonable to stop getting him coffee if the interaction has become transactional without any real connection. Your feelings are valid, and you shouldn't feel guilty for choosing not to continue a one-sided gesture. If he values the relationship, he should be more considerate of your time and effort, just as you have been. You're not in the wrong. Don't get him coffee. He can get it himself. If he really cares and initiates a reasonable conversation about his feelings or why he was excluded, I'd recommend mentioning you felt like the friendship had dissolved, so you were giving him space. You can also communicate that you're willing to invite him along for coffee, but running someone's coffee errands weekly sounds like a TaskRabbit thing, lol. Next up, whenever my sister Lynn attends family events, she never watches her own children and expects everyone else to do it, including my kids. My children, a 13-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old child, have complained about this multiple times. Lynn's toddler in particular is wild and disruptive. At a recent family gathering, I told my kids explicitly not to get roped into watching Lynn's child. When Lynn left the room to gossip with our mom, she left her toddler behind, assuming someone else would take responsibility. My 13-year-old daughter, seeing this, got up and left the room as well. While unattended, Lynn's toddler pulled on the tablecloth, knocking all the food off the table and spilling red pasta sauce all over my mom's carpet. The child started screaming, and Lynn came back to yell at my daughter, accusing her of abandoning the child. I stepped in and told Lynn that it was her responsibility to watch her own kids. Lynn tried to justify herself, saying she thought my daughter was watching the baby. I asked her, "Did you ask my daughter to watch your child?" Lynn replied that she assumed my daughter was smart enough to look after a toddler if left alone with them. My daughter fired back, saying maybe Lynn should be smarter about having kids she can't control or take care of. Yes, that was a rude comment, but I couldn't help laughing at the blunt truth. My mom then told my daughter to help clean up the mess, since, according to her, my daughter had helped cause it. My daughter refused, saying it was entirely Lynn's fault for letting her kids run around unsupervised. This led to my mom saying we could all leave because we disrespected her and her house. My daughter responded that she wouldn't return until her grandmother and aunt started respecting her. So I took my kids and left. Now, my mom is insisting that I punish or at least speak to my daughter and make her apologize for her behavior. However, I don't think my daughter did anything wrong. Lynn's lack of responsibility for her children is the real issue here. Was I wrong for supporting my daughter in this situation and refusing to force her to apologize? Let's start judging. Honestly, at the age your kids are, I would say entirely wang. You're not in the wrong. Not only for how you are supporting them to express their feelings and needs, but also not bend to the pressure. Don't accept responsibility for things that are out of your control, and you haven't agreed to be your responsibility and teach your children the same. You seem to be doing an excellent job on that. The retort your daughter gave was indeed rude. It would have been better to not say things about others' reproductive choices, because it is quite obvious she is picking up these opinions and judgments from her parents. But either way, the parent is the responsible person for whatever the child did, even if there was another minor babysitting. You're not in the wrong. Lynn should hire a babysitter if she can't keep track of her kids. Good on you for supporting your kids in this situation. I can see how in many families the responsibility could be rolled onto the shoulders of the older kids and force them to babysit just by default, which honestly isn't right. Parents need to be responsible for their own kids. You're not in the wrong. My mom told my daughter to help pick up the mess because she helped cause it. How did she help cause it? By not psychically picking up on her aunt's responsibility handoff. When my kids were that age, I never left a room without being clear who I was asking to watch the kid, and never took advantage of that. If you have a kid, they are your responsibility. End of story.